Do you remember those after-school snacks that greeted you the second you kicked off your shoes in the 1960s? From a glass of chocolate milk to a plate of Jell-O cubes, these little bites turned ordinary afternoons into something special. They weren't fancy, but they were dependable, comforting, and always waiting at the kitchen table. Let's take a trip back and revisit 30 snacks every kid knew and loved in that simpler, sweeter decade. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If there was one after-school snack that could claim the crown in the 1960s, it was the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fancy, and it certainly wasn't expensive, but it was reliable. This was the sandwich that greeted millions of kids as they slammed the screen door behind them, tossed their books on the kitchen table, and went digging for the peanut butter jar. A thick smear of Skippy or Jif, a quick spoonful of grape or strawberry jam, and 2 slices of soft white bread, Wonder Bread if you were lucky, were all it took to satisfy a hungry child waiting for dinner. The beauty of PB&J lay in its accessibility. Peanut butter was protein-rich, shelf-stable, and cheap, while jelly stretched a fruit harvest well beyond its season. Parents felt good serving it, and kids never got tired of it because the flavor could swing sweet or salty depending on the ratio. Some households went heavy on the peanut butter, making it stick to the roof of your mouth until you had to gulp down a glass of milk. Others leaned toward jelly, creating sandwiches that practically oozed purple sugar down your hands. Either way, it worked. Emotionally, PB&J was more than a snack. It was a ritual. Kids ate it while watching cartoons, sitting on the porch steps, or even trading halves at school lunch. It was democratic in a way. Rich or poor, everyone knew what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich tasted like. And it wasn't just food, it was a piece of childhood independence. Many kids learned to cook for the first time by spreading peanut butter on bread and slapping on jelly, proud of the masterpiece they'd made without mom's help. Today, you'll find PB&J competing with protein bars and kombucha smoothies, but it hasn't really lost its place. In fact, it's still a top comfort food. Maybe that's because for all our modern snacking options, nothing beats the sweet and salty simplicity that made the PB&J king of the 1960s kitchen. It's a reminder that the most enduring classics are often the simplest ones. A lesson that's hard to argue with when you're holding a sandwich that tastes like childhood itself. Ritz crackers with cheese. In the 1960s, few after-school snacks carried the quiet prestige of Ritz crackers topped with cheese. The golden buttery rounds came stacked in their unmistakable red box, a little taste of luxury that still managed to be affordable enough for everyday kitchens. Nabisco had marketed Ritz as everything a cracker should be, and in many households, it delivered on that promise. Paired with a slice of cheddar, a square of Velveeta, or, when things got really futuristic, a squirt of aerosol cheese from a can, Ritz crackers became a crunchy, salty, smooth reward after a long day of multiplication tables and playground politics. The charm of this snack was its versatility. A child could arrange the crackers neatly on a plate and feel like they were hosting a tiny cocktail party of one, or they could slap cheese on haphazardly and run off to the TV, crumbs trailing behind. Parents liked Ritz because they seemed just a little fancier than saltines, but still cost-friendly and easy to keep on hand. Cheese stretched the snack into something almost substantial. Protein, calcium, and a veneer of classiness wrapped in one bite. It was the kind of food that made kids feel grown up, even if they were still watching cartoons in pajamas. Nostalgia clings to Ritz and cheese because it was both simple and celebratory. This was the snack that appeared at birthday parties, church socials, and living room gatherings. It blurred the line between casual and special, equally at home on a plastic plate after school or on a serving tray at a neighbor's house. Today, kids might reach for string cheese or pre-packaged snack packs, but the spirit of Ritz with cheese lives on. It's a reminder that sometimes the fanciest snacks are also the simplest. Ants on a log. If you grew up in the 1960s, chances are you were introduced to ants on a log. That peculiar little invention meant to make vegetables more palatable to children. The concept was simple: a sturdy stalk of celery, a thick smear of peanut butter tucked neatly in its groove, and a row of raisins lined up like tiny ants marching across the top. It was part snack, part craft project, and part parental strategy to sneak something green onto the plate. Mothers loved it because it looked wholesome and a little clever. Kids loved it because it was playful playful and just sweet enough to distract from the fact that, yes, they were still eating celery. At its heart, Ants on a Log was a reflection of the era's approach to healthy snacking. Processed foods were on the rise, but there was still a cultural push to balance convenience with nutrition. Peanut butter supplied protein and a sticky contrast to the celery's watery crunch. Raisins, those humble little nuggets from the Sun-Maid box, gave the illusion of dessert. Together, they created a snack that was at once practical, inexpensive, and vaguely educational. After all, what child could resist imagining that their food was a miniature ecosystem? For many kids, the memory of Ants on a Log is tied to after-school hunger pangs, Tupperware containers at picnics, or even classroom parties where the teacher beamed with pride at this fun, healthy option. And while some children quietly scraped the raisins off, others delighted in the sugary pop they added to each bite. Some families even experimented with variations, substituting cream cheese for peanut butter or using other dried fruits when raisins ran out, proving its adaptability in any pantry. Compared to today's granola bars or fruit pouches, Ants on a Log feels quaint, almost whimsical, yet its legacy endures. Proof that with a little imagination, even celery can become a beloved childhood snack. It wasn't just a food, it was a moment of play on a plate. A reminder that snacks could be as much about creativity and memory as about flavor. Kool-Aid and graham crackers. Few after-school pairings capture the 1960s as perfectly as a tall glass of Kool-Aid and a plate of graham crackers. On their own, each was humble. Kool-Aid was essentially sugar, flavoring, and water, while graham crackers were the plainest of baked goods, descended from a 19th century health reformer's dream of curbing sinful appetites. But put them together in the hands of a child home from school, and suddenly you had a snack that felt like a little party at the kitchen table. Kool-Aid, brightly colored and relentlessly cheerful, was marketed as the drink of childhood itself. The smiling pitcher mascot hadn't yet begun busting through walls with his famous, "Oh yeah," but even in the early 60s, it was a symbol of fun and freedom. A nickel's worth of powder could turn a plain pitcher of tap water into something exotic: cherry red, electric blue, or neon orange, each flavor tasting vaguely of fruit but unmistakably of sugar. Parents loved it for its price. Kids loved it because it made their tongues turn colors. Then there were the graham crackers. Crisp, slightly sweet, and easy to dunk, they paired beautifully with that cold glass of Kool-Aid. Sometimes children would smear peanut butter or frosting between two crackers, but often the plain rectangle was enough. A stack of them on a plate with a glass beading with condensation nearby was the picture of an ordinary weekday turned special. The emotional resonance of this duo lies in its simplicity. It was the taste of neighborhood playdates, of rushing home to watch black and white cartoons, of mothers who believed snacks should be cheap, quick, and just filling enough to hold kids until dinner. Today's children might sip juice boxes or sports drinks, but few modern combinations feel as iconic or as unapologetically sweet as Kool-Aid and graham crackers, Jell-O cubes. In the 1960s, Jell-O cubes weren't just a snack, they were an edible form of entertainment. Every household seemed to keep a few brightly colored boxes in the pantry, waiting for a slow afternoon when a mother or grandmother would whip up a batch. Once the gelatin set, the pan was cut into neat squares, and suddenly the kitchen table held a tray of shimmering, jewel-toned cubes that jiggled, wobbled, and dared you not to smile. They weren't merely food, they were spectacle. Part of the charm came from Jell-O's place in the American pantry. Cheap, shelf-stable, and endlessly versatile, it was the darling of both thrifty homemakers and experimental cooks. For children, however, the attraction was purely sensory. The cubes glistened like rubies and emeralds, cold to the touch and delightfully slippery. Bite into one, and it dissolved almost instantly, leaving behind a burst of cherry, lime, or orange sweetness that felt far more exciting than an apple slice or carrot stick. After school, Jell-O cubes often arrived in small bowls with spoons, though some kids ate them with their fingers, giggling as they squished between bites. They showed up at birthday parties, church potlucks, and family picnics, where their cheerful wobble always stole the show from more serious dishes. There was something democratic about them, too. Inexpensive enough for every family, yet festive enough to feel like a treat. Compared to today's snacks, granola bars in shiny wrappers, pouches of pureed fruit, or protein shakes, Jell-O cubes seem almost quaint. But that's exactly why they endure in memory. They remind us of a time when a little sugar, some hot water, and a patient wait in the fridge could create a dessert that felt magical. In every wiggle, there was joy, and in every cube, a taste of 1960s childhood. Bologna sandwich. If there was a working-class hero of the 1960s after-school kitchen, it was the bologna sandwich. Unpretentious, inexpensive, and endlessly adaptable, this humble creation was the kind of snack that could be slapped together in under a minute, yet it stuck to your ribs long enough to hold you until dinner. All it took was a slice or two of bologna, often Oscar Mayer, pulled straight from that yellow package, a couple of pieces of white bread, and a swipe of mustard or mayonnaise. Sometimes the bologna was fried in a pan until the edges curled up like little cups. Sometimes it went straight from fridge to bread without ceremony. Either way, it got the job done. Bologna itself was a curious product of the post-war food industry, an affordable processed meat that could feed a crowd without draining the family budget. For many children, its taste became synonymous with home. There was a comforting saltiness, a soft bite, and just enough mystery in what exactly went into it to spark jokes among siblings. Yet few complained, after all. When you were hungry after a long school day, a bologna sandwich felt like a prize. The nostalgia runs deep. Kids would often pair their sandwich with a cold glass of milk or a handful of potato chips, eating cross-legged on the living room floor while cartoons flickered on the television. Others carried bologna sandwiches in brown paper lunch bags, trading halves with friends in the cafeteria. Some families dressed them up with a slice of American cheese, lettuce, or even a squirt of ketchup, while others insisted the sandwich was best kept plain and simple. Today, artisanal delis and charcuterie boards reign supreme, but the bologna sandwich still lingers in memory. It may not be glamorous, but it represents a certain kind of American resilience. Simple ingredients, quick assembly, and satisfaction in every bite. For many, just the smell of bologna being fried in a skillet can transport them back to a kitchen where mom or dad worked quickly to fill a hungry belly, proving that comfort doesn't have to be complicated. Tang with animal crackers. Nothing says 1960s childhood quite like a glass of Tang paired with a handful of animal crackers. Tang was more than just a drink. It was a marketing phenomenon, wrapped in the glamour of the space race. When NASA astronauts famously sipped it in orbit, kids on Earth felt like they were drinking the very same fuel that powered America's journey to the stars. In reality, it was orange-flavored sugar powder mixed into water, but in the imagination of a child, that glass of neon liquid might as well have been rocket fuel. Parents loved Tang because it was cheap, quick, and shelf-stable. A scoop of powder transformed plain tap water into a citrusy spectacle, complete with that unforgettable zing that was part sweetness, part artificial tang. Kids, of course, adored it for its bright color and bold flavor, even if it sometimes clumped at the bottom of the glass in a stubborn swirl. To dunk an animal cracker into Tang was to risk a soggy mess, but to chase a sip with a bite was pure harmony. Crunchy little circus-shaped cookies, softened by a wash of space-age orange. Animal crackers had been around for decades by then, but in the 1960s, they still carried a certain magic. Packaged in those little red and yellow boxes with string handles, they were portable, playful, and just sweet enough to feel like a treat without being overwhelming. Children nibbled the heads off lions and the legs off elephants while sipping their fluorescent Tang, a combination that turned the ordinary kitchen table into a ticket to adventure. Today, kids might grab sports drinks and granola bites, but few snacks capture that same blend of imagination and sugar rush. Tang and animal crackers were more than food. They were a childhood performance, part circus, part space mission, all nostalgia. Frozen TV dinners as snacks. In the 1960s, the idea of a frozen TV dinner as an after-school snack might sound excessive, but for plenty of kids, that aluminum tray was the height of modern convenience. Imagine coming home, kicking off your saddle shoes, and sliding a neat rectangle of Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, peas, and maybe a brownie into the oven. 45 minutes later, because this was before the microwave revolution, you had yourself a miniature banquet served piping hot. For a child who had grown up on sandwiches and crackers, this felt like luxury, even if the peas were wrinkled and the mashed potatoes could double as spackle. The TV dinner dinner was a cultural icon by then. Introduced in the 1950s, it had become a staple of suburban life by the following decade, perfectly aligning with families glued to their living room sets. For latchkey kids or those with working parents, heating up a TV dinner wasn't just filling, it was empowering. You could prepare it yourself, no chopping or stirring required, just patience and the occasional burned finger from the oven rack. It was independence wrapped in foil. Of course, not every child managed to finish the entire tray. Sometimes a sibling would swoop in to steal the brownie square, or maybe the peas were pushed around until they looked convincingly eaten. Still, the combination of a hot meal and the glow of afternoon cartoons made TV dinners feel like a real treat. They blurred the line between snack and supper, a novelty that children embraced wholeheartedly. Looking back, it's easy to smile at how futuristic they once seemed. Today, we have microwavable meals, meal kits, and drive-through bags, but the frozen TV dinner remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when eating straight from a foil tray felt both modern and special. Chips and onion dip. In the 1960s, few snacks carried the aura of party sophistication like a bowl of chips paired with onion dip. It was simple, salty, and perfectly designed for after-school nibbling or impromptu get-togethers in the living room. The foundation was always the same: a sturdy bag of potato chips, usually Lay's, their ridges perfect for scooping. The magic came with the dip, a creamy concoction made by combining sour cream with a packet of Lipton onion soup mix. It was effortless, inexpensive, and somehow felt decadent, a little touch of culinary flair that kids could manage without a parent hovering over the counter. The combination captured the spirit of mid-century convenience. Packaged foods were on the rise, and there was a cultural fascination with quick sophistication, a way to impress neighbors or siblings without much effort. Potato chips were already a beloved snack, but dunking them into tangy, flavorful dip elevated the experience. For children returning from school, it was interactive eating, the crunch, the creamy coating, and the occasional debate over whose turn it was to grab the last chip. There is also an emotional resonance to the snack. Chips and onion dip often accompanied the hum of the TV, cartoons playing in black and white or early color, and the faint scent of after-school meals still lingering in the kitchen. It was social, communal, and fun, a bridge between the structured world of school and the freedom of home. Friends would hover around the bowl at birthday parties or family gatherings, laughing and dipping until all that remained were chip crumbs and an empty container scraped clean. Today, nachos and gourmet dips dominate snack culture, yet the 1960s pairing retains a certain nostalgic charm. It reminds us that sometimes simple ingredients, sour cream, a soup mix, a bag of chips, can create an enduring, memorable snack. For many, just the sight of ridged chips beside a chilled bowl of onion dip can spark memories of shag carpets, wood-paneled dens, and carefree afternoons when sharing a snack was enough to make the day feel special. Milk and Oreos. For countless kids in the 1960s, the perfect after-school snack was as simple as a glass of cold milk and a stack of Oreos. There was something almost ritualistic about it: the crackle of the foil wrapping, the careful twist of the cookie to separate the chocolate wafers, the quick scrape of the sweet white filling with a finger, and finally, the satisfying dunk into a tall glass of milk. It was a combination that required minimal effort but delivered maximum joy, a little ceremony at the kitchen table that turned an ordinary afternoon into a moment of indulgence. Oreos themselves had already earned a place in American snack culture. Introduced decades earlier, they were marketed as the cookie twist, lick, dunk experience, and children took that command seriously. Milk elevated the snack from simple sweetness to something comforting and almost nurturing. It was a practical pairing, too. Chocolate cookies alone could be a bit dry, but a quick dip into milk transformed them into creamy, chocolatey bites that seemed almost luxurious. Emotionally, milk and Oreos were tied to routine and ritual. Kids returned home from school hungry and restless, tossing backpacks aside while they performed the familiar steps of unwrapping, twisting, licking, and dunking. It was also a shared experience. Siblings might argue over who got the last cookie, or parents might indulge themselves with a cookie or two alongside their children. In a way, it was a small but powerful connector, linking generations over a simple pleasure. Even today, when milk is often swapped for almond, oat, or soy, and Oreos come in flavors flavors that range from birthday cake to limited edition collaborations, the classic dunk remains iconic. There's something timeless about chocolate meeting cream, wafer meeting milk, a snack that transcends decades while holding tight to the warm, nostalgic glow of a 1960s kitchen. Vienna sausages on toothpicks. In the 1960s, Vienna sausages on toothpicks were a peculiar but beloved after-school snack, especially for kids who loved anything that felt miniature and manageable. These little canned sausages were tiny enough to pop in your mouth in one bite, yet hearty enough to make you feel like you were eating something substantial. Often chilled straight from the can or heated quickly on the stovetop, they were served on toothpicks, which somehow made the whole experience feel elegant, like hors d'oeuvres for children. Vienna sausages were inexpensive, shelf-stable, and endlessly convenient. For working parents or busy households, they were a reliable snack that didn't require preparation or cleanup beyond a simple plate. The cans were a marvel of mid-century convenience foods, a testament to the ingenuity of a generation learning to balance frugality with practicality. Kids loved them not only for the taste, a salty, savory punch of meat, but also for the novelty of skewering them and popping them one by one into their mouths. The toothpick added an element of play, turning snack time into a game of mini food performance. There was also a subtle thrill in serving them. Sometimes the Vienna sausages appeared at after-school parties or small gatherings where kids pretended they were grown-ups enjoying cocktail snacks. The ritual of opening the can, lining up the sausages on toothpicks, and passing them around made these tiny sausages feel like a treat far beyond their humble ingredients. Compared to today's protein bars, pre-packaged snacks, or artisan meat sticks, Vienna sausages on toothpicks may seem quaint, even silly, but they endure in memory as a symbol of childhood inventiveness and mid-century practicality. They remind us that snacks didn't need to be fancy to be fun, and sometimes the simplest but canned fruit cocktail. In the 1960s, canned fruit cocktail was a staple of after-school snacking, especially in households where convenience and affordability were key. Open a can, drain the syrup, or not if you liked it extra sweet, and pour the colorful mixture of peaches, pears, grapes, pineapple, and cherries into a bowl. Suddenly, a humble aluminum can transformed into a medley of flavors and textures that felt festive, even if it wasn't exactly fresh from the orchard. For children, the bright, jewel-toned pieces of fruit were visually appealing, almost like candy masquerading as healthful fare. Canned fruit cocktail represented more than just taste. It was a triumph of practicality. Families who lived through economic challenges or simply wanted quick, no-fuss snacks embraced the product for its long shelf life, easy storage, and instant readiness. Mothers could reach for it as a quick treat or an impromptu dessert, while kids delighted in the variety of shapes and the subtle syrupy sweetness that clung to each bite. Eating it became almost tactile, scooping up the slippery grapes, savoring the soft chunks of peach, or poking at the maraschino cherry with a fork. Emotionally, canned fruit cocktail bridged the worlds of nutrition and indulgence. It was a snack you could serve alone on a plate, stir into yogurt, or even layer in gelatin for a more elaborate treat. The colorful combination spoke of modest abundance, a small victory against the humdrum of everyday routines. Kids returned from school, tired and hungry, and the simple pleasure of a bowl of mixed fruit could brighten the late afternoon hours. What made fruit cocktail particularly memorable was the anticipation it created. Who would get the coveted cherry? In many homes, that single red jewel was a prize, sometimes fought over, sometimes saved for last. It was a snack that sparked small rituals and sibling rivalries, reminding us that even the simplest foods carried stories. Compared to today's fresh fruit options, smoothie packs, and organic fruit cups, canned fruit cocktail might seem quaint, even a little retro, yet in its simplicity lies nostalgia, a reminder that even a humble can of fruit could deliver joy, color, and a touch of sweetness to childhood, embodying the resourcefulness and creativity of 1960s snack culture. Spam slices on bread. In the 1960s, few after-school snacks carried the same mix of practicality and comfort as Spam slices on bread. Spam itself had been a household fixture since the late 1930s, first introduced as an affordable, shelf-stable meat meat product and gaining heroic status during World War II when it fed soldiers and civilians alike. By the time the 1960s rolled around, it was firmly entrenched in American kitchens, especially in working and middle-class homes where convenience mattered just as much as cost. For hungry kids tumbling through the door after school, a slice or two of Spam on soft white bread made for a quick, filling snack that felt just hearty enough to bridge the gap until dinner. The preparation was as simple as it was versatile. Some kids ate their Spam cold, sliced directly from the can, and slapped between two slices of bread with a smear of mustard or mayonnaise. Others preferred it fried in a pan until the edges crisped and curled, giving off a savory aroma that made the kitchen smell like something more substantial was cooking. In either form, it was salty, rich, and satisfying, with a texture that held its own against the pillowy softness of Wonder Bread. Emotionally, Spam on bread carried more weight than its humble appearance suggested. For many children, it was tied to memories of parents who stretched the family food budget while still providing something comforting. It was also a snack that traveled well, tucked into lunch boxes, or wrapped in wax paper, making it a companion to both playground adventures and homework sessions. Today, Spam has found renewed life as a cult favorite, celebrated in everything from Hawaiian cuisine to foodie mashups. But in the 1960s, it was simply part of everyday survival and satisfaction, a salty slice of resilience resting on bread as ordinary and essential as childhood itself. Popcorn, stovetop. Long before microwaves turned popcorn into a 3-minute bagged affair, the 1960s kitchen knew the sound and smell of stovetop popping. For kids coming home after school, the rattle of kernels in a pan with a slick of oil was as thrilling as the snack itself. First came the hiss as the oil heated, then the sharp crackle of the first kernel bursting, followed by the steady drumbeat of pops that built into a noisy crescendo. By the time the lid on the pot was rattling, anticipation was at its peak. When the popping finally slowed, the pan was lifted with care, and out came a heaping bowl of fluffy, steaming popcorn that felt both homemade and magical. This was a snack that stretched a dime into abundance. A small bag of kernels could feed the whole family, making it perfect not just for after-school munching, but also for family TV nights or neighborhood gatherings. Children might sprinkle a little salt, drizzle melted butter if available, or, on especially indulgent days, dust the bowl with a spoonful of sugar for a sweet twist. Unlike chips or packaged snacks, stovetop popcorn carried a sense of participation. Kids loved leaning against the counter, listening for each pop, and feeling as if they were part of the cooking process. Popcorn's appeal wasn't just about taste, but about ritual. Sharing a bowl on the living room floor while cartoons flickered or sneaking handfuls before siblings got their share created moments that lingered long after the kernels were gone. It was communal, generous, and fun in a way that pre-portioned snacks could never match. Parents liked it too. It was affordable, filled bellies quickly, and kept little hands busy. And in an era when entertainment often revolved around the family television or a neighbor's backyard, a big bowl of popcorn acted almost like glue, drawing everyone together. Today's popcorn may come in microwavable bags or gourmet varieties with exotic seasonings, but stovetop popcorn from the 1960s remains iconic. It was simple, abundant, and just theatrical enough to turn an ordinary afternoon into something memorable. Each pop was a promise, and each shared bowl was proof that the simplest foods often leave the deepest impressions. Carrot sticks with ranch. In the 1960s, the idea of carrot sticks with ranch dressing hadn't quite taken hold, mostly because ranch dressing itself was still a novelty, bottled and sold only after its invention at a California dude ranch in 1954. By the mid-60s, however, it was beginning to creep into suburban kitchens, and carrot sticks suddenly had a new lease on life. Until then, raw vegetables as an after-school snack often felt like punishment disguised as nourishment. A limp stick of celery or a pile of carrot batons on a plate rarely thrilled a hungry child. But dip those same carrots into a cool, tangy pool of ranch, and suddenly you had something crunchy, creamy, and surprisingly fun. Parents appreciated this pairing because it balanced the era's growing fascination with convenience foods with a nod toward nutrition. Carrots were cheap, easy to slice, and endlessly available. Ranch, with its buttermilk tang and garlicky herb kick, turned plain vegetables into something snack-worthy. For children, children, this was a small victory, the kind of snack that felt indulgent without straying too far from the "eat your veggies" mantra echoing through households of the time. The ritual itself was part of the appeal. Kids dunked carrot sticks with reckless abandon, some coating the entire stick, while others daintily dipped just the tip before crunching. The contrast of textures, the snap of the carrot against the smooth richness of the dressing, made every bite a little event. And in a decade when after-school snacks often leaned sweet, this savory option stood out. Looking back, carrot sticks with ranch feels like a bridge between two worlds: the wholesome, garden-grown traditions of earlier generations and the rising tide of packaged convenience that defined the 1960s. It was proof that even something as ordinary as a carrot could, with the right dip, become a snack kids actually looked forward to. Devil Dogs, Hostess cupcakes.
Drake's Devil Dogs. They're cream-filled devil's food cakes.
For kids in the 1960s, nothing signaled sweet relief after a long school day quite like tearing open the plastic wrapper of a Devil Dog or a Hostess cupcake. Packaged snack cakes were booming in popularity, riding the wave of America's love affair with convenience, and for children, they felt like treasure. Devil Dogs, with their oblong chocolate cakes sandwiching a ribbon of marshmallow-like cream, were chewy, rich, and unapologetic messy. Hostess cupcakes, on the other hand, stood like tiny monuments to indulgence, moist chocolate rounds crowned with glossy icing and that iconic white swirl that felt like a personal flourish from the baker. What made these treats irresistible wasn't just their taste, but their accessibility. Sold cheaply and wrapped for portability, they slid easily into lunch boxes or waited patiently in the pantry for after-school raids. They were portioned perfectly for a child's appetite, though few kids stopped at just one. The sugar rush was immediate, and the joy of licking cream off your fingers or peeling away the cupcake's paper liner was part of the fun. These weren't just desserts, they were edible rituals. Emotionally, snack cakes were tied to freedom and reward. They were the kind of food kids could grab without adult supervision, and the little indulgence felt like a reward for enduring long division or spelling tests. Sharing a package with a sibling, or refusing to, was another part of the childhood drama that surrounded them. Today, artisanal bakeries and gourmet cupcakes might dominate, but the nostalgia of Devil Dogs and Hostess cupcakes endures. They remind us of a time when happiness could be unwrapped from cellophane, when convenience was novel, and when a child's sweetest moment of the day came not from a screen, but from a small, chocolate-covered, cream-filled cake. Apple slices with peanut butter. Among the sea of sugary snacks and packaged treats that defined the 1960s, apple slices with peanut butter stood out as a kind of compromise between health and indulgence. Parents liked to believe they were sneaking a little wholesomeness into their children's after-school routine, while kids quickly realized that the crisp sweetness of an apple paired with the creamy richness of peanut butter was far from a punishment. It was one of those rare snacks where both sides, mom in her apron and a child with a sweet tooth, felt like they were getting exactly what they wanted. The preparation couldn't have been simpler. An apple, often Red Delicious or Macintosh in those years, was cored and sliced, sometimes left with the peel and sometimes not, depending on the household. A spoonful of peanut butter was spread across each slice, sometimes neatly, sometimes in messy dollops that stuck to fingers and grins alike. The first bite offered a contrast that was unforgettable, the snap of juicy fruit giving way to the salty, nutty smoothness of peanut butter. For children used to plain fruit, it was a revelation. What made this snack endure wasn't just flavor, but feeling. It carried the sense of care, of a parent taking a few extra seconds to elevate a simple apple into something special. For kids, it was also fun to eat, sticky, a little chaotic, and entirely satisfying. Some experimented further, sprinkling raisins on top, or if lucky, drizzling a bit of honey for an even sweeter bite. Others dunked apple wedges straight into the peanut butter jar when no one was looking, a sneaky indulgence that made it even more memorable. Looking back, apple slices with peanut butter feel like a small act of ingenuity from an era when balance mattered, where thrift met thoughtfulness and health could be dressed up as a treat. It was proof that a snack didn't have to come from a box to feel like magic, and that sometimes the simplest pairings, the crunch of an apple and the richness of peanut butter, create the kinds of food memories that last a lifetime. Cornbread leftovers.
And today we're tackling a classic leftover cornbread. Don't you dare think about throwing away that golden goodness.
In the 1960s, when frugality still lingered in many households, cornbread leftovers often became the unsung hero of the after-school snack lineup. Cornbread was already a staple at dinner tables across the country. Warm, golden squares served alongside bean stews or Sunday roasts. But the magic came the next day when those humble scraps transformed into something new. For a hungry child just home from school, finding a plate of yesterday's cornbread on the counter was like stumbling onto hidden treasure. The beauty of leftover cornbread lay in its versatility. Some kids enjoyed it cold, the crumbly edges a bit firmer after a night of rest, while others knew the trick of reheating a slice with a dab of butter until it turned fragrant and soft again. A drizzle of honey, syrup, or even a sprinkle of sugar could elevate it into a sweet treat, while the more adventurous might rumble it into a glass of milk, creating a makeshift pudding that was equal parts strange and comforting. Nothing went to waste, and every bite carried the subtle smokiness of cornmeal and the richness of family kitchens that prided themselves on stretching ingredients as far as they would go. Emotionally, cornbread leftovers carried a different weight than store-bought snacks. They reminded children of Sunday dinners, of family conversations, of mothers and grandmothers who baked from scratch rather than buying cellophane-wrapped cakes. There was pride in a snack that felt homemade and hearty, even if it was just the remnants of last night's meal. Today, when cornbread is often relegated to barbecues or holiday tables, it's easy to forget the everyday role it once played. In the 1960s, cornbread leftovers weren't just about thrift. They were about resourcefulness, comfort, and the kind of simple satisfaction that never quite goes out of style. Saltines with sugar or jelly. Back in the 1960s, when snack cupboards weren't overflowing with endless bags of chips or granola bars, children often turned to the simplest of staples, the humble saltine cracker. Its plain, lightly salted surface was a blank canvas, just begging for a little creativity. And kids, or often their mothers, knew exactly how to dress it up. Enter the sugar or jelly topping, a quick fix that transformed something ordinary into a sweet, satisfying treat. With nothing more than a sprinkle of sugar from the kitchen jar or a smear of grape jelly from the fridge, saltines suddenly felt like dessert. The appeal of the snack wasn't complicated. Saltines were cheap, sold in large sleeves that seemed to last forever, and were always on hand for soups, casseroles, or sick day meals. But to a hungry child after school, they were the perfect vehicle for a bit of indulgence. Jelly added bright bursts of fruit flavor, usually grape or strawberry, the favorites of the era, while sugar offered a sparkling crunch that elevated the cracker's simplicity. It was kitchen alchemy at its finest, taking a bare-bones pantry item and turning it into something that felt playful and a little decadent. More than flavor, though, this snack carried with it the feeling of improvisation, of making do with what was around. Parents saw it as a clever way to stretch the budget while still giving their kids something sweet. And children learned that joy could come from the simplest combinations. It wasn't a Hostess cupcake or a candy bar, but it scratched the same itch. Today, saltines might be overlooked, seen more as an accompaniment than a star, but in the 1960s, they taught kids an important lesson, that sometimes the best snacks come from imagination, thrift, and just a sprinkle of sugar. Cereal bowls.
An epic mashup of peanut butter and chocolatey flavor is a perfect combo, and it's only in Reese's Puff cereal, a delicious part of this complete breakfast.
Few things capture the spirit of 1960s after-school snacking like a big bowl of cereal. Breakfast foods weren't confined to the morning in that era. Cereal boxes sat on kitchen counters and pantries like colorful invitations, promising both sustenance and fun. For kids tumbling through the door after a long day of school, pouring themselves a bowl of Frosted Flakes, Cheerios, or Lucky Charms wasn't just convenient. It felt like freedom. Unlike cookies or sandwiches, cereal was was a snack children could prepare entirely on their own. No knives, no oven, no parental supervision required, just bowl, spoon, cereal, and milk. Cereal in the 1960s wasn't only about flavor, though the sugary rush of Cap'n Crunch or the comforting crunch of cornflakes certainly delivered. It was about the experience. The box with its bright mascots and games on the back, the sound of cereal hitting the bowl, and the inevitable race against time before the milk turned everything soggy. For many kids, the real prize was hidden inside the box, a plastic toy or decoder ring that made eating cereal feel like a daily treasure hunt. From a parent's perspective, it was the perfect solution: affordable, filling, and quick to clean up. Cereal was marketed as fortified with vitamins and minerals, giving mothers just enough reassurance that this was more than a sugar bomb in a bowl. For kids, it was practically a dessert masquerading as something respectable. And while some families stuck to simpler brands like Rice Krispies or Wheaties, others gravitated toward the increasingly colorful, sugar-coated varieties that mirrored the playful optimism of the decade. Looking back, cereal bowls in the 1960s were more than just snacks. They were symbols of independence, advertising magic, and the optimism of a generation raised on jingles and cartoon mascots. They carried the sound of clinking spoons against bowls, the rush of cold milk, and the shared joy of sitting cross-legged in front of the TV while cartoons played. In a way, they were also a glimpse of the future, foreshadowing the rise of convenience foods that would dominate kitchens in decades to come, while still holding a place in memory as one of the simplest, happiest snacks of childhood: Rice Krispies Treats.
Whoa, do we have the snack for you? Rice Krispies Treats Chocolatey Peanut Butter.
In the 1960s, few after-school snacks held as much magic as Rice Krispies Treats. They weren't store-bought back then, not yet sealed in shiny plastic wrappers with expiration dates months away. No, they were homemade, sticky, and still slightly warm from the stovetop, crafted in kitchens where a pan of marshmallows melted into butter was considered the ultimate act of alchemy. Kids would crowd the counter, spoons in hand, waiting for that glorious moment when the puffed rice was stirred in, transforming the goo into a chewy, crackling mass that stuck to everything in sight: hands, pans, and inevitably shirts. The beauty of Rice Krispies Treats was their simplicity: just 3 ingredients: cereal, butter, marshmallows, and yet they managed to deliver joy in a way few snacks could. They were sweet without being fussy, easy to slice into squares or just rip apart with impatient fingers. Their texture, that perfect balance of crunchy and gooey, made them endlessly satisfying. And for the thrifty homemaker, they were a budget-friendly crowd pleaser, stretching a box of cereal into a dessert that could feed the whole neighborhood. Culturally, they were more than just a snack. They were a little event. Children knew when the pot came out that something special was happening. Moms often made them for school bake sales, church events, or birthday parties, where the sight of those sticky squares stacked on a plate could light up a room of kids faster than any frosted cake. They were a symbol of sharing, of homemade goodness that didn't require fancy ingredients or hours of effort. Today, the pre-packaged versions still linger on store shelves, but they lack the charm of those homemade 1960s batches. Back then, Rice Krispies Treats weren't just snacks. They were edible proof that joy could come from the simplest things: Kool-Aid popsicles.
So, today we will be mixing Jell-O with Kool-Aid.
On a sweltering summer afternoon in the 1960s, nothing felt more refreshing or more triumphant than pulling a homemade Kool-Aid popsicle out of the freezer. They were the ultimate do-it-yourself treat, crafted not from some fancy recipe, but from a packet of powder, a scoop of sugar, and water stirred together until the kitchen smelled like cherry or grape. Mothers poured the mixture into ice cube trays or inexpensive plastic molds, slid in wooden sticks, or even plastic spoons if that's what was on hand, and left the rest to the magic of the freezer. Hours later, out came icy gems in vibrant colors that stained tongues and fingertips, a badge of summer fun. These popsicles were inexpensive and endlessly adaptable, which made them a household favorite. For just pennies, a whole batch could be made, turning a box of Kool-Aid into an afternoon's worth of smiles. Flavors like tropical punch, lemon lime, and the ever-popular popular cherry, brought rainbow variety to a neighborhood of kids who'd gather on porches, comparing which one left the brightest mark on their lips. In a time before artisanal gelato shops or endless freezer aisles of novelty treats, this was the height of frozen luxury. What made Kool-Aid popsicles special wasn't just their taste, but the ritual. Kids remembered checking the freezer every half hour, convinced they'd freeze faster if they peeked enough times. Parents smiled knowingly, letting the anticipation build until finally the pops were ready to wiggle free from their molds. Sometimes they came out perfect, sometimes they broke in half, but nobody complained. The pieces disappeared just as quickly. Looking back, Kool-Aid popsicles embody the spirit of 1960s snacking. Thrifty, fun, and communal. They were proof that with a little sugar, a splash of color, and a whole lot of patience, happiness could be frozen and held in your hand. Deviled eggs.
Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making some quick and delicious deviled eggs.
Deviled eggs may seem like a party platter staple today, but in the 1960s, they also pulled double duty as an after-school snack. Few things were as satisfying as walking into the kitchen to find a plate of halved eggs, their creamy centers dusted with a hint of paprika, waiting to be stolen before dinner. They were the kind of snack that felt a little fancier than it really was. A treat that carried the flair of a cocktail hour appetizer, yet managed to sneak its way into the hands of hungry kids fresh off the school bus. The process was simple but always a bit ceremonious. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled with care, sometimes imperfectly, leaving pockmarked whites that were lovingly smoothed over with filling. The yolks were mashed with mayonnaise, a squirt of mustard, maybe a splash of vinegar, until they transformed into a rich, tangy mixture. Piped or spooned back into their egg white shells, they were finished with a sprinkle of paprika, that unmistakable orange-red flourish that signaled someone had gone the extra mile. For thrifty families, deviled eggs were a godsend. They stretched a dozen eggs into something shareable and satisfying, offering protein-packed fuel without resorting to pricier store-bought snacks. They were also endlessly adaptable. Some households added pickle relish for sweetness. Others leaned on onion powder or a dash of hot sauce for bite. No two plates tasted exactly alike, and that made them uniquely tied to each kitchen's personality. Culturally, deviled eggs carried a touch of mid-century sophistication. They belonged at Tupperware parties, church picnics, and potlucks. But their presence in the everyday home blurred the line between special occasion and simple snack. For kids, they were irresistible because they felt like grown-up food, yet were bite-sized enough to devour in 2 quick mouthfuls. They also bridged generations. Grandparents might recall Depression-era simplicity, while children of the 1960s associated them with comfort and abundance. Today, chefs dress them up with bacon, avocado, or gourmet toppings, but the 1960s version was straightforward, humble, and unforgettable. Deviled eggs were proof that elegance didn't have to be expensive, it just had to taste like home, reminding us that sometimes the simplest recipes leave the deepest impressions. Pudding cups. There was a certain magic in peeling back the thin foil lid of a pudding cup, the moment when the seal gave way with a satisfying pop and revealed a glossy surface of chocolate, vanilla, or butterscotch cream. In the 1960s, pudding wasn't yet the pre-packaged convenience we know today. More often, it started with a box of instant or cook-and-serve mix whisked together on the stovetop, filling the kitchen with a sweet, milky aroma. Parents would pour the silky mixture into small glass dishes or brightly colored plastic cups, tuck them into the refrigerator, and let time and cool air work their spell. Hours later, those cups emerged as chilled treasures, a snack that felt both homemade and indulgent. Pudding cups carried an air of specialness that went beyond their humble ingredients. They were soft and comforting, easy to spoon up, and just sweet enough to feel like dessert without being extravagant. Chocolate was always the reigning favorite, but vanilla vanilla and butterscotch had their loyal fan clubs too. Some kids even got fancy, layering flavors or topping the surface with a dollop of whipped cream or a scattering of cookie crumbs. Others stirred in bananas or crumbled graham crackers, transforming a simple pudding into a mini parfait. For parents, pudding cups were practical, affordable, easy to stretch across several servings, and versatile enough to feel fresh with small variations. For kids, they were pure joy, especially on days when a rough spelling test or a scraped knee called for something sweet to make it better. Unlike candy bars or store-bought cookies, pudding cups carried the warmth of home, even if they started from a boxed mix. Looking back, they represent the 1960s balance of convenience and care, modern enough to be quick, traditional enough to feel homemade, a spoonful of nostalgia, one cup at a time. Graham cracker sandwiches with frosting or peanut butter. If there was ever a snack that defined childhood ingenuity in the 1960s, it was the humble graham cracker sandwich. No instructions needed, no fancy packaging required. Just two plain graham crackers pressed together with something sweet or sticky in between. Peanut butter was the classic choice, creamy or crunchy, depending on what sat in the pantry. But on extra special days, leftover frosting from a birthday cake or holiday cookies made its way between those golden crackers, instantly transforming an everyday bite into a decadent little treat. The beauty of the graham cracker sandwich was its versatility. Peanut butter versions leaned toward the wholesome side, packed with protein and hearty enough to hold a hungry kid over until dinner. Frosting-filled ones, on the other hand, felt almost mischievous, like sneaking dessert before the main meal. Some kids swore by adding jelly with their peanut butter, creating a crunchy, sticky cousin of the PB&J. Others experimented with marshmallow fluff, making a s'mores-inspired snack without the campfire. What made these sandwiches special wasn't just the taste, but the ritual of making them. Kids could assemble them entirely on their own, spreading peanut butter with a butter knife, slathering frosting with far less precision, and proudly smashing the crackers together with the confidence of a master chef. The result was rarely neat, filling oozing out the sides, crumbs everywhere, but that was part of the fun. In the broader culture of the 1960s, when convenience foods were booming but homemade touches still mattered, the graham cracker sandwich hit the sweet spot. It was frugal, endlessly adaptable, and just indulgent enough to feel exciting. Today's kids might reach for granola bars or packaged snack cakes, but nothing quite matches the homemade charm of two crackers, a little filling, and a lot of imagination. Peanut butter on saltines. Sometimes the best snacks are the simplest ones, and in the 1960s, peanut butter on saltines was a perfect example of that truth. It was a pairing that didn't need advertising or flashy packaging, just a box of crackers, a jar of peanut butter, and maybe a glass of milk on the side. Every kitchen had those two staples on hand, and together they created a snack that was salty, nutty, and endlessly satisfying. Kids returning home from school could assemble it in seconds, spreading peanut butter onto each little square and stacking them into tiny towers, or eating them one by one like miniature sandwiches. Part of the appeal was the contrast. Saltines were crisp and light, almost plain in their own, while peanut butter brought the richness, the stick-to-the-roof-of-your-mouth heft that made each bite feel filling. Some kids preferred smooth peanut butter for its neatness, while others loved the crunch of peanuts tucked into the spread. And for those with a sweet tooth, a drizzle of honey or a few chocolate chips sprinkled on top could elevate the humble cracker into something closer to dessert. It was also a snack that parents loved to encourage. Cheap, quick, and portionable, it stretched a jar of peanut butter further than slathering it onto thick sandwich bread. It didn't take long to prepare, didn't dirty many dishes, and still gave growing kids the protein and energy they needed between lunch and dinner. In many ways, it was the original bite-sized protein snack before marketers dreamed up today's snack packs and energy bars. Peanut butter on saltines was also highly portable. Wrapped in a napkin or tucked into a lunchbox, it could travel just as easily to the playground, the schoolyard, or a friend's house down the block. It was the kind of snack you could share without fuss, passing out crackers, plopping a spoonful of peanut butter in the middle, and letting kids build their own combinations. That small ritual of assembly gave it an interactive charm, turning an ordinary cupboard staple into something fun. Looking back, peanut butter on saltines feels like the ultimate comfort food. Unfussy, dependable, and and always tasty. It wasn't flashy, but that was the point. Sometimes the simplest combinations are the ones that stay with us longest, and this humble duo remains proof that nostalgia often tastes like the easiest recipes of all. Leftover cold pizza. There's something oddly magical about opening the fridge after school and finding a cardboard box with a few slices of last night's pizza waiting. In the 1960s, pizza was still a relative novelty in many American homes, gaining popularity thanks to frozen versions in the supermarket and the spread of neighborhood pizzerias. But whether it came from the oven or a takeout box, one thing quickly became clear. Cold pizza was its own kind of snack, completely different from the hot version, yet every bit as satisfying. Cold pizza carried with it a rebellious streak. It was unconventional, a little bit messy, and certainly not what Mom would have considered a proper snack, but that was part of its charm. The cheese hardened slightly, the sauce lost some of its steaminess, and the crust firmed up into something sturdy enough to eat with one hand while flipping through TV channels or playing outside. Kids didn't care that it wasn't reheated. In fact, the coldness was what made it special. It was pizza in a new costume, still indulgent but somehow easier to sneak before dinner. For families in the 60s, leftover pizza also reflected the era's shift toward convenience and changing tastes. Italian-American food was booming in popularity, and pizza was a symbol of this cultural crossover. Having pizza in the fridge meant you were part of that modern, fun food culture, and eating it cold turned it into a snack that belonged as much to the kids as it did to the dinner table. There was also something communal about leftover pizza. If there were only a few slices left, siblings had to bargain, split, or sometimes argue over who got the last piece. That small ritual made the snack feel more like treasure than leftovers. Even the sight of a grease-stained box was enough to spark excitement. For latchkey kids coming home to an empty house, grabbing a cold slice from the fridge meant instant comfort and independence. No stove, no waiting, just a meal in your hand. Today, cold pizza is practically a badge of honor, defended with as much passion as debates about pineapple toppings. But back then, it was a small joy, proof that the best snacks weren't always planned. They were discovered the next day, waiting patiently behind the fridge door. Apple pie slice. Few after-school snacks carried as much quiet pride as a slice of apple pie. In the 1960s, this wasn't just dessert. It was a symbol of home itself. If you were lucky enough to come home to a kitchen where a fresh pie cooled on the counter, it meant your household still carried the tradition of scratch baking, rolling out crusts, peeling apples, and filling the air with the kind of cinnamon-laced aroma that could make even the grumpiest kid drop their school bag and head straight for the table. Of course, apple pie also lived in the freezer aisle by then, thanks to brands like Morton and Sara Lee, which meant not every pie was grandma's recipe, but the experience was no less comforting. Warm or cold, a slice felt like a reward, a treat that belonged to the American ideal of something sweet after a long day. Unlike cookies or candy, pie had weight to it, both literally and emotionally. It was fruit and pastry, soft and flaky, a balance of tartness and sugar that felt a little more grown up than other kids' snacks. Eating it cold straight from the fridge was common, though some kids got spoiled with a reheated slice topped with a melting scoop of vanilla ice cream. Either way, the pie carried an emotional resonance. It was a reminder of holidays, Sunday dinners, or visits to grandma's house, moments when the whole family gathered and life seemed just a little sweeter. Today, pie might not be the everyday snack it once was, but the nostalgia is strong. In a world of granola bars and protein shakes, a slice of apple pie still represents something timeless, a connection to simpler kitchens, slower afternoons, and the sweetness of being cared for with love baked into every bite. Marshmallow fluff sandwich. If there was ever a snack that screamed childhood indulgence in the 1960s, it was the marshmallow fluff sandwich. Sweet, sticky, and unapologetically over the top, this treat was a perfect storm of sugar and nostalgia. Unlike peanut butter and jelly, which pretended to be balanced with protein and fruit, the fluff sandwich made no excuses. It was dessert disguised as an after-school bite. Spread between two slices of soft white bread, marshmallow fluff turned an ordinary loaf into something that felt like a carnival treat, brought right to the kitchen table. The genius of this snack was its simplicity. Open the jar, grab a spoon, and you were halfway there. Kids would watch as the fluff stretched into gooey strands, clinging stubbornly to the knife and threatening to glue their fingers together if they weren't careful. Sometimes it was paired with peanut butter to create the legendary Fluffernutter, but often the fluff was left to shine all on its own. For parents, it was cheap, shelf-stable, and fast, a blessing in an era when convenience was starting to reshape American kitchens. Emotionally, the fluff sandwich represented freedom. It wasn't something you ate neatly with a fork. It was handheld, messy, and fun. The first bite stuck to the roof of your mouth, forcing you to wiggle your tongue around to pry it loose. And every kid secretly loved that challenge. It was a snack that felt rebellious in its pure sweetness, a sugary hug at the end of a long school day. Part of its magic also came from the era itself. The 1960s were an age of bright packaging, jingles, and food innovation, and marshmallow fluff was a product that seemed made for children's delight. Lunchboxes sometimes carried mini fluff sandwiches, and some families even toasted them to make the filling extra gooey. However it was enjoyed, it was more than food. It was an experience. Today, marshmallow fluff sandwiches might raise eyebrows in a world obsessed with low sugar and whole grains, but the memory lingers. One sticky bite, and suddenly you're back in the 1960s, swinging your legs at the kitchen counter, grinning with a face smudged in white sweetness. Chocolate milk. Few after-school pick-me-ups in the 1960s held the same magic as a tall, frosty glass of chocolate milk. It was the kind of treat that managed to feel both wholesome and indulgent at the same time, the perfect middle ground between dessert and nourishment. Whether stirred up with a spoonful of Hershey's syrup or scooped from a tin of Nestle Quick, chocolate milk was a ritual as much as a snack. Kids would watch with fascination as the dark syrup swirled into the white milk, creating lazy ribbons until, after a quick stir, it transformed into a glass of sweet, creamy comfort. For many households, chocolate milk was the reward at the end of a long day of school, a way for parents to sneak in something healthy while still letting their kids feel spoiled. Milk gave it that wholesome stamp of approval, but let's be honest, the real draw was the sugar rush. Some kids gulped it down in one go, leaving behind a chocolatey mustache, while others lingered with it, dunking cookies or graham crackers into the glass until they softened into bite-sized mush. Beyond the flavor, chocolate milk carried an emotional warmth. It was the drink that made you feel taken care of, the beverage equivalent of a hug in a glass. Sitting at the kitchen table, legs swinging, you could sip and chat with a sibling, or simply stare out the window as the day melted into evening. Today, chocolate milk has been rebranded as everything from a gym recovery drink to a nostalgic indulgence, but its 1960s charm remains unmatched. One sip brings back the image of a simpler time when happiness could be poured into a glass, stirred with a spoon, and enjoyed with a smile that needed no explanation. And there you have it, 30 after-school snacks that shape the sweet, salty, and sometimes quirky memories of the 1960s. From sticky fluff sandwiches to cold pizza straight from the fridge, each one carried its own little story of comfort and childhood joy. If these snacks brought back memories or gave you a craving, don't forget to give this video a like, share it with a friend who remembers, and subscribe for more nostalgic food journeys. After all, the past tastes even better when we enjoy it together.